The smoke still hung low in the air, a thick, choking fog of ash and burnt metal that blurred the edges of the battlefield. The sun above the jungle planet was hidden behind layers of gray clouds and rising dust, casting a strange yellow light across the wreckage of the Coalition outpost. Bodies lay scattered, both human and alien, many broken beyond recognition, their armor twisted like crumpled foil. In the middle of this silence walked Corporal Jace Rowan. His unit had moved on, their orders clear sweep, scan, confirm no survivors, and return to base for evacuation. But something kept Jace behind. Maybe it was the eerie stillness, or maybe it was the gut feeling that something or someone was still alive. His HUD blinked weak signals now and then, fading in and out, not enough to be sure. He scanned left, then right, pushing aside large chunks of debris, keeping his ears open for the faintest sound. Most of the time, it was just wind. Until it wasn't. A faint metallic noise reached him, a kind of rasp, like something scraping armor. Jace froze. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. He followed the sound, careful with each step, his eyes alert. Behind the twisted remains of a Zorvethian dropship, half buried under fallen trees and rubble, he found the source. It was a warrior, huge, armored in silver-blue exoplates, with sharp ridges running along its shoulders and down its spine. The alien was clearly one of the Zorvethian elite, bred for war and trained to be proud, fearless, and unbreakable. But this one was broken. Jace could see the damage immediately. A deep wound across its back, legs crushed beneath a fallen beam, blood thicker and darker than human blood pooling beneath. Its helmet was off, tossed aside, revealing a face with sharp, bone-like ridges, now twisted in pain. Yet its eyes were alert, burning with something between rage and shame. The warrior didn't speak, but locked eyes with Jace. Not pleading, never pleading, but defiant. As if daring the human to finish what the battle had started. Jace didn't raise his weapon. He knelt instead. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because this alien wasn't trying to fight. Maybe because something about the scene felt wrong. He tapped his comms and called for medevac, reporting a wounded survivor. The reply was cold Zorvethian. Leave it. No value. Move on. Jace stared at the device, disbelief creeping into his face. Say again? He asked. The voice repeated, annoyed this time. Paralyzed. Warrior cast. Their own protocols demand they die in battle. No one's coming for it. And that was it. Silence again. The kind that made the jungle feel heavier than it was. Jace looked back at the alien. Still watching him. Still expecting to be left alone. Maybe even wanting it. But Jace wasn't built that way. He'd seen enough death. He couldn't let another sentient being die when he had a chance to help. He dropped his pack and got to work. It wasn't easy. The beam pinning the alien was heavy, almost fused into the dirt. Jace grunted, cursed under his breath, used his cutting tool to break it apart piece by piece. The warrior made no sound, even as the weight shifted, even as pain clearly surged through its body. Jace respected that. Once the alien was free, Jace dragged him slowly, carefully to a more sheltered spot under the remains of a bunker wall. There, he patched what wounds he could. Human medkits weren't built for Zorvethian biology, but he improvised. Wrapped, sealed, injected, cooled. The alien remained silent through it all, only flinching once, when Jace accidentally pressed too hard against the spine. Hours passed like that. No words. Just effort. Outside, the jungle buzzed and snapped, like it was waiting to see what would happen next. When night came, Jace lit a small fire using crushed rations and a bit of fuel gel. The flickering light gave the area a strange glow. The alien stirred then, finally speaking in a low, gravel-like voice. Why? It asked, the word thick with accent but clear enough. Jace looked up, surprised. Because you're alive, he said simply. The alien frowned, or maybe that was just its face. My people do not return from this. Jace shrugged. Maybe they should start. There was a pause. Then the alien, whose name Jace would later learn was K-Tail, said nothing more. But the look in his eyes had changed. Less guarded. Less proud. Not weak, but uncertain. And for a Zorvethian warrior, that was saying something. The night dragged on. Jace stayed awake, listening for enemy movements. His motion sensor occasionally blinked red, but nothing approached. He knew more scouts would come eventually. Maybe hostile. Maybe scavengers. And he wasn't sure how long he could protect both of them. But for now, he'd made a choice. He wasn't leaving K-Tal behind. Not when he had a chance to do the right thing. Orders be damned. Somewhere out there, maybe his unit was watching from drones, wondering what he was doing. Maybe they thought he'd lost it. But to Jace, this was clarity. This was war stripped of politics and species and rules. One soldier helping another. That's what mattered. As the jungle quieted around them, K-Tail spoke again. Not much. Just a few lines about his last fight, his final stand, how he had taken down 6 swarm beasts before the beam crushed him. There was pride in his voice, but also grief. He believed his story was over, but Jace didn't. "Your fight's not done," he said, tossing a piece of thermal cloth over the alien. "Not if I've got anything to say about it." K-Tail turned his head slightly, just enough to show acknowledgement. No thanks. No bow. Just that look. Respect. The beginning of something that neither of them could fully understand yet, but would change everything. The night stretched on, the firelight flickering against metal and stone, 2 warriors once enemies now bound by survival, surrounded by silence, danger, and the unknown. And though no one else came to save the paralyzed alien warrior, Jace Rowan did. Because he was human. And that's what humans do. The morning light filtered weakly through the thick jungle canopy, turning everything a dull green as if the planet itself was trying to forget the battle that had scarred it. Smoke still drifted from distant wreckage, and the scent of burned metal and ozone clung to the air like a warning. Corporal Jace Rowan hadn't slept. He sat near the low fire that had burned through the night, his rifle close, eyes scanning the shifting shadows beyond the collapsed bunker wall. Beside him, the massive form of K-Tail lay still, his breathing slow but steady. The alien warrior had not moved much, and Jace knew the damage to his spine was serious. Paralyzing. The kind of injury that meant a death sentence in most armies, especially the Zorvethian kind, where honor mattered more than survival. But Jace wasn't ready to give up, not on this mountain of muscle and pride who had once tried to kill humans and now lay helpless but alive, caught between 2 worlds, his people who had abandoned him, and the human soldier who wouldn't walk away. Jace had built a rough shelter around them using bits of metal plating, broken branches, and parts scavenged from the ruins. It wouldn't hold off a full attack, but it gave them cover and some warmth. He had used up most of his medical supplies the night before, patching wounds he didn't fully understand. He wasn't a doctor, but desperation could make anyone learn fast. K-Tail hadn't complained, hadn't made a sound during the whole thing. That silence had impressed Jace. Even humans flinched under pain. This one just stared, like he was measuring every second, deciding if this strange human was worth trusting. The first words came mid-morning. K-Tail's voice was deep, cracked, but strong. "You dishonor yourself by staying." Jace chuckled without humor, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're welcome," he muttered, adjusting the field bandages. K-Tail's eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across his face. "My kind, we die in battle. No pity. No weakness." Jace leaned back, looking at the sky through a gap in the trees. "Yeah, well, humans do things different. We patch up our wounded. Even the big, scary ones." He glanced down at the alien, his expression serious. "You're not weak. You're alive. There's a difference." The silence stretched between them like a thin wire, tight with unspoken thoughts. Eventually, K-Tail spoke again, slower this time. "You should have left me. Your army, they gave no order to stay." Jace grinned faintly. "Didn't need one. Some things you don't need orders for." He paused, then added, "Besides, you're not just some injured enemy anymore. You're my responsibility now, so deal with it. K-Tel stared at him, and something subtle shifted in his eyes, less cold, more curious. This human was different. They spent the day mostly in silence. Jace foraged what little he could from nearby ration crates, splitting his food with K-Tel, who took it reluctantly at first, then accepted without a word. Communication remained slow, rough. K-Tel's trade language was broken, and Jace's knowledge of Zorvethian was non-existent. But hand gestures helped. So did patience. Bit by bit, a kind of understanding began to form not through words, but through action. When Jace adjusted K-Tel's position to ease pressure on his back, the alien didn't resist. When K-Tel motioned for water, Jace fetched it without question. And when the wind shifted in the late afternoon and brought the sound of distant movement, branches cracking, leaves rustling, they both froze at the same time, instincts kicking in like they were part of the same unit. Jace crawled to the edge of their hiding place and peered through the thick undergrowth. Shapes moved between the trees fast, smooth, low to the ground. Not human. Not Zorvethian. Swarm. 3 of them. Insectoid, armored, fast. Scavenger class. Probably sent to clean up what was left. Jace ducked back, heart pounding. Company, he whispered. K-Tel's eyes flared, and he reached for a weapon that wasn't there. His claws scratched uselessly against the dirt. Rage flickered across his face, not at Jace, but at his own helplessness. Jace raised a hand. Don't. I've got this. He grabbed his rifle, checked the charge, then looked back at the alien. I need your eyes. You see movement, signal me. Like this. He showed a simple hand motion. K-Tel nodded, understanding clear in his expression. The next 10 minutes were tense. The swarm moved closer, weaving through the ruins, searching. Jace took position behind a broken wall and fired the moment one of them exposed its head. A clean shot. The creature dropped with a shriek. The others scattered, then circled. Jace ducked just in time to avoid a spray of acidic fluid that burned through part of the wall. He returned fire, using short bursts, shifting position between shots. From behind, K-Tel gave sharp, precise warnings with his hand. Left. Right. Behind. It was like working with a spotter, one who understood the battlefield even while paralyzed. Jace adjusted his aim each time, trusting K-Tel's calls, and landed hit after hit. Eventually, the swarm pulled back, vanishing into the trees, their hunting interrupted by resistance they hadn't expected. Jace collapsed beside K-Tel, breathing hard, armor scorched. Still think I should have left you? He panted. K-Tel didn't answer immediately. He turned his head toward Jace and spoke slowly. You fight with heart, not just skill. That is rare. Jace smiled faintly. Guess you're stuck with me then. The firelight returned as night fell again, and for the first time, K-Tel asked a question about Earth. About humans. What they valued. Why they didn't leave their wounded behind. Jace answered simply. Because we believe everyone matters, even when they're down. Especially then. K-Tel was silent again for a long while. Then he said something that made Jace look up sharply. If I live, I will remember this. Jace raised a brow. That a threat or a promise? K-Tel didn't smile, his kind rarely did, but his tone held a new weight. An oath. As darkness wrapped around them once more, with unknown enemies still lurking, and no rescue in sight, 2 warriors once enemies, now something else sat side by side in a broken world. Not as saviors. Not yet as friends. But as survivors who had begun to see past blood and battle, and into something deeper, trust. The days on the jungle planet blurred into each other, marked only by the rising heat, the changing shadows, and the constant tension in the air that never seemed to fade. Jace Rowan had stopped counting how long he'd been trapped in the wreckage with the paralyzed alien warrior, K-Tel. The world around them had grown quieter, but not safer. They both knew the silence of the battlefield didn't mean peace, it meant predators were watching. Jace had fortified their shelter as best he could, reinforcing walls with scavenged armor plating and setting up warning systems using tripwires and empty ration cans. K-Tal helped in his own way, guiding Jace with battlefield wisdom, pointing out likely attack routes, explaining how the swarm hunted. Despite his condition, K-Tal's mind remained sharp, tactical, unshaken. In those long, tense days, Jace had begun to see the alien not as a burden, but as a fellow soldier, a commander without troops, surviving with only grit and strategy. One morning, the wind shifted again, and Jace noticed the birds had stopped calling. The jungle was too still. He scanned the tree line and felt the chill of being watched, a cold prickle at the back of his neck. His motion sensors flickered to life, flashing red, then cutting out. In interference, the swarm was back. And this time, it wasn't scouts. Jace crouched beside K-Tal, whispering quickly, "We're not alone. At least 5 signatures. Maybe more. Coming fast." K-Tal's face remained calm, but his eyes narrowed with focus. "They know you stayed," he said. "They want to finish what they started." Jace nodded. "Then we make them regret it." The attack came without warning. A screech tore through the trees as a swarm beast burst from the underbrush, mandibles snapping. Jace fired instantly, dropping it midair. 2 more followed, flanking him. He dove for cover, returning fire while dodging acidic spit that hissed and burned through the ground around him. K-Tal shouted sharp instructions: angles, cover, timing. Left tree climber. Jace twisted and shot, hitting another creature before it could leap. Under roots, burrower. Another blast. Another body fell. Jace moved like a shadow, sliding between cover, drawing on every ounce of training and instinct. But the enemy wasn't stupid. They were coordinating now, learning his tactics, pushing him toward open ground. Jace was breathing hard, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek. His shoulder armor was cracked, and ammo was running low. One of the swarm beasts tackled him from the side, and they rolled through the mud. Its claws slashed across his arm, tearing fabric and skin. He jammed his knife into its neck and shoved it off, then scrambled back to K-Tal. "Not gonna lie," he muttered. "This is looking pretty bad." K-Tal looked him dead in the eye. "Then we do not die quiet." With a deep growl, K-Tal began dragging himself forward with his arms, ignoring the pain. He reached into a broken crate nearby and pulled out a Zervethian plasma core, damaged, unstable, but still glowing faintly. "Overload this," he said, handing it to Jace. "They come through the clearing. You detonate it. The blast will reach them all." Jace looked at the core, then at K-Tal. "That close? We'll be caught in it too." K-Tal didn't blink. "Then we die on our feet. Not buried." But Jace shook his head. "No, not dying. Not today." Instead of rigging it as a trap, Jace pulled back into the shelter and used the exposed power cell to charge a dead turret they had salvaged days ago. He rerouted the energy through K-Tal's knowledge of the weapons systems, using him as a guide to connect alien tech to human cables. It was risky, unstable, and completely outside protocol, but it worked. The turret buzzed to life, its sensors pinging targets. The next time the swarm charged, they were met with a storm of plasma fire. Screeches echoed across the jungle as 2 more beasts dropped. But there were too many. The turret overheated, exploding in a flash that rocked the bunker. Jace was thrown back, ears ringing, half blinded by dust. His hands burned from shrapnel. He crawled to cover, coughing, only to see another beast crawling through the fire, eyes locked on K-Tal, who was unarmed, exposed, and still unable to move. Without thinking, Jace sprinted. He tackled the creature mid-charge, driving his knife into its side again and again. Blood thick and black splashed across his face. The beast shrieked and died. Jace collapsed next to K-Tal, gasping. K-Tal stared at him. "You would die for me?" he asked quietly, almost like he couldn't believe it. Jace wiped his blade clean, nodding once. "No one gets left behind. Not on my watch." The sounds of the jungle faded again. No more beasts came. Whether the survivors fled or regrouped, Jace didn't care. For now, they were safe. But he was running out of options. No more ammo. No more power. If help didn't come soon, the next wave would be their last. That night, Jace sat beside the fire again, his arm in a sling, his face bruised and worn. K-Tel lay propped against a wall, silent as usual, but this time there was something different in his eyes. Not just respect, loyalty. He spoke without being asked. Where I come from, warriors who fall are forgotten. Left in honor. Alone. But I have seen something better. A warrior who defends, even when there is no reward. Who risks death, not for glory but for someone he barely knows. Jace looked at him, too tired to smile. We call that being human. K-Tal extended one hand, a gesture unfamiliar but strong. Jace clasped it without hesitation. In that moment, no rank, no species, no war mattered. There were only two soldiers, fighting not for orders or flags, but for each other. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And whatever future K-Tel thought he had lost, Jace had already started giving it back one breath, one bullet, one battle at a time. The jungle had gone quiet again, but it was not the calm of safety, it was the silence before another storm. Corporal Jace Rowan could feel it in his bones. The swarm attack had left him bruised, bleeding, and dangerously low on supplies. His rifle was nearly empty, his armor cracked, and the makeshift shelter he'd built with K-Tal was barely holding together. But the worst part wasn't the damage around him, it was the weight of time. Rescue hadn't come. His distress signal had been sent days ago, and the only reply from command had been static. Either no one was coming, or they had been written off. Lost in action. Just another forgotten skirmish on a forgotten world. But Jace refused to give up. He didn't care that the odds were bad. He didn't care that the only ally he had left was an enemy soldier, a Zorvethian paralyzed from the waist down. What he did care about was the bond they had forged through blood and fire, because K-Tel wasn't just an alien anymore. He was a brother now. And Jace had already decided if they were going to die, they would die fighting side by side. K-Tal's condition was worsening. The makeshift treatment Jace had given him had slowed the infection, but the wounds along his spine and lower body were starting to fester. Jace had tried everything cleaning the wounds, crafting herbal poultices from native plants, even giving K-Tal small doses of human antibiotics. But nothing worked for long. K-Tal didn't complain. He never showed pain, never begged, never even asked if Jace would leave. He just watched the tree line, silent and alert, like a wounded predator waiting for the final battle. It was K-Tal who finally broke the silence one afternoon, his voice low and rough. You must go. Jace looked up from where he was boiling water. What? K-Tal gestured to the horizon. There is a mountain range. 20 clicks east. If you reach the high point, your signal will reach orbit. Maybe they will come. Jace narrowed his eyes. I'm not leaving you behind. We already went over this. K-Tal's jaw clenched. I am dead weight. I cannot fight. You have done more than your kind would have. You honored me. That is enough. Jace stood slowly, stepping toward him. No, it's not. I didn't stay to play hero. I stayed because you matter. You earned your place beside me. So stop trying to push me away. If we go together. For the first time, K-Tal looked away. His silence wasn't pride anymore. It was sorrow. You are too human, he said finally. That will be your strength and your end. Jace didn't respond. He packed what little remained, a single ration bar, half a canteen of water, and the last energy cell. Then he did something that broke all regulations. He rigged a stretcher from old plating, straps, and vines, and lifted K-Tal onto it with great effort. The weight nearly broke him, but he adjusted the straps and started moving. Each step was a battle. The jungle floor was uneven, roots and mud and broken debris everywhere. Jace's muscles screamed with pain, but he gritted his teeth and kept going. Every time he thought of stopping, he looked at K-Tal and remembered the way the alien had protected him during the swarm attack, guiding him even when helpless. That wasn't weakness, that was loyalty. And Jace didn't abandon loyalty. The journey took hours. The sun beat down through the trees, and the insects returned in clouds. Jace swatted them away, his legs trembling. He passed the wreckage of old dropships, the bones of dead soldiers, both human and alien. War didn't care who you were. It only left ruins. But Jace walked on. Once, he slipped in a shallow ravine and almost lost the stretcher. His shoulder dislocated painfully, but he gritted his teeth and popped it back in. K-Tel growled from the stretcher. "This is madness." Jace spat blood and smiled. "Welcome to the human experience." By the time they reached the rocky slope of the mountain, the sky had begun to darken. Jace had no shelter left, no food, and barely any strength. He collapsed at the base of a steep incline, chest heaving. K-Tel tried to move but could only shift slightly. "We stop," he said. "You cannot climb this. Let me go." Jace looked up at the summit, a jagged peak slicing into the clouds, then back at K-Tel. "No. If I give up now, all the pain, all the blood, it means nothing." He took one final breath, secured the stretcher straps, and began the climb. The slope was brutal. His boots slipped on loose stone, and the air grew thinner with every step. Muscles tore. Hands bled. Rocks cut his legs and arms. But he kept moving. Not because he believed in miracles, but because he believed in the promise he made. K-Tel never asked for saving, but that didn't mean he didn't deserve it. Halfway up, storm clouds rolled in, and lightning cracked the sky. Rain began to fall, turning the rocks slick. Jace slipped again, nearly tumbling off the edge. He caught himself just in time, his knuckles raw. K-Tel shouted for him to stop, but Jace only shouted back louder. "I'm not leaving you behind. Not now. Not ever." At last, just before dawn, he reached the summit. His arms were numb, his face soaked in blood and rain, and his body felt like it was breaking apart. But he climbed to the tallest point and jammed his signal beacon into the ground. He activated the emergency flare, sending a red light bursting into the sky. Then he collapsed, unconscious, the stretcher beside him. K-Tel, barely awake, stared up at the flare, the clouds parting around it. "Human," he whispered, his voice filled with something he had never said before: hope. Far above, in orbit, a patrol ship caught the signal. And for the first time in days, the silent jungle world responded not with death, but with a promise of rescue. The first thing Jace Rowan felt when he came to was the cold. It was nothing like the humid, sticky heat of the jungle he had been struggling to survive in for days. This was clean, clinical, a sterile chill that bit into his skin. His eyes fluttered open slowly, and for a moment, all he could see was white light and the blurred shapes of medical equipment around him. He tried to move, but his body felt heavy, as though his muscles had forgotten how to function. A sharp pain coursed through his left arm, and he winced, forcing himself to focus. "Take it easy, soldier," a voice said, familiar, yet distant. "You've been out for a while." Jace blinked, his vision clearing just enough to see the figure standing by his bed. It was a medic, but beyond her, standing against the far wall, was someone Jace hadn't expected to see again. Someone he had fought to keep alive, someone who had never asked for his help, but someone who had become a part of him, just as much as his own heartbeat. K-Tel. But the thing that struck Jace the most was how different K-Tel looked. The color had returned to his face, his eyes were clearer, and though his spine was still a battlefield of scars and healing tissue, there was life in him again. His once broken and immobile body was now moving with the assistance of advanced human prosthetics. K-Tel. Jace's voice cracked as he said his name, his throat dry. "You're alive." K-Tel gave him a single nod, and for the first time in their long journey, there was a warmth in his gaze. "Because of you, human," K-Tel replied, his voice low but sincere. "Because you carried me. Because you refused to let me die." He stood slowly, with the assistance of the medical equipment, and though his movements were careful, they were no longer slow or pained. He looked at Jace with a strange mixture of admiration and something deeper, something more human than Jace had ever imagined the warrior capable of. I've never known a being so persistent in their care for others, K-Tail said, his words measured but heavy. I thought that my people's honor was everything, but you have shown me a different kind of strength. Jace, still groggy from his unconscious state, couldn't help but smile despite the pain in his body. I told you, we don't leave our own behind. He paused, then looked up at the ceiling as memories from the jungle flooded back to him, the sound of plasma fire, the thick air, the desperate fight to survive. I didn't leave you behind, and I didn't stop. I couldn't. You deserved more than to die alone. K-Tal's gaze softened, and for a moment, Jace thought he saw a flicker of understanding in the warrior's eyes. Not just the understanding of what Jace had done, but the understanding of who Jace was. They were no longer strangers or enemies. They were brothers in arms, forged in the fires of war, loyalty, and a bond neither of them had expected. The medic moved to Jace's side, placing a hand on his shoulder. You've both been through hell. Your recovery will take time, but you're safe now. She looked between Jace and K-Tal, her expression softening. I've read your report. You two, she paused, her voice trailing off, as though she couldn't fully comprehend what had happened. What you've done. It's beyond what most people would do for anyone, but you did it for each other. You fought for something greater than yourself. Jace didn't reply at first. He simply met K-Tal's gaze, both of them sharing an unspoken understanding. There was no victory here, no parade, no medal for what they had done. There was only survival, and that was enough. They had each earned their place in this world, not through orders or conquest, but through a shared belief that life was worth fighting for no matter how broken the world around them seemed. K-Tal turned his head toward the window, gazing out at the stars. The distant, endless expanse of space. My people will come for me, he said quietly, but I do not know what I will return to. The Zorvethian Empire may no longer recognize me, not after my failure. He sighed, a heavy sound that rumbled in his chest. And yet, I feel no fear of that. You have shown me another way to honor life, not just death. And for that, I am grateful. Jace nodded. It's not about the Empire, K-Tal. It's about what you choose to do now. You get to decide what happens next. For a long time, neither spoke. The stars beyond the ship's window blinked out in the distance, silent and eternal. Jace shifted in his bed, feeling the pull of exhaustion, the weight of the journey still pressing on his body, even though he was now safe. You know, Jace said, breaking the silence, his voice tired but filled with a quiet conviction. Back on Earth, we have a saying. It goes like this, not just a soldier. We're more than the uniforms we wear, more than the battles we fight. We're people. And that's what matters. K-Tal turned his head back toward him, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something that felt like a question, and perhaps an understanding. And what of you, human? What is it you will become now that the fight is over? Jace let out a slow breath, a half-smile crossing his lips. Maybe I'll become someone who helps the ones who can't help themselves. Maybe I'll become a soldier of something better than war. Something worth fighting for. K-Tal said nothing more, but he nodded slowly. In his eyes, Jace saw something he hadn't expected: respect, admiration, and maybe just a little bit of trust. The kind that could only be earned, the kind that only those who had truly been to the edge and back could understand. There was a long road ahead for both of them. The battles had ended, but the future was still uncertain. Whatever came next, whether for Jace, K-Tal, or both, they would face it, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as something more. As survivors. And in that moment, under the quiet hum of the ship's life support systems and the faint glow of distant stars, Jace knew that the bond they had formed would last longer than any war. He glanced at K-Tal one last time, his voice quiet but resolute. We'll make sure no one forgets us. Not for what we did, but for who we are. Not just soldiers, but men survivors. K-Tal looked at him, his face hard and yet somehow softened by the weight of their shared experience. And that is enough.